Death didn't come with a white light or a choir of angels. It tasted like sterile hospital air, and the bitter realization that my fiancé was holding another woman's hand while my organs shut down. I gave him my kidney, my money, my life. In return, he gave me a shallow grave and a hefty life insurance payout for his new bride. When I opened my eyes 10 years in the past, I made a single vow. Let him rot. Cold sweat glued my t-shirt to my back. I gasped, tearing at my throat, expecting the plastic rigidity of a ventilator tube. Nothing. Only the stale, recycled air of my old apartment and the faint metallic scent of the cheap coffee maker dripping in the kitchen. I scrambled backward on the bed until my spine hit the headboard. My hands flew to my right side, fingers digging frantically under my shirt. Smooth skin, no raised, jagged line of angry red tissue, no hollow ache radiating deep within my abdomen. Both kidneys were there quietly, doing their jobs, oblivious to the fact that in another timeline, one of them had been carved out and handed over to a man who would leave me to die. My breath hitched in my chest. I looked around. The chipped paint on the windowsill, the hideous floral curtains I had bought at a thrift store when I first moved in, the calendar pinned to the wall above the desk, October 14th, 5 days before the surgery. A laugh clawed its way up my throat, harsh and entirely devoid of humor. It sounded like shattering glass in the quiet room. I was back. The universe, in some twisted display of cosmic irony, had rewound the clock. Or maybe my own burning hatred had simply refused to let me stay dead. I didn't care about the mechanics of it. All I cared about was the searing, blinding clarity that washed over me. Footsteps shuffled in the hallway, heavy, hesitant. The bedroom door creaked inward, and there he was, Liam. He looked exactly as I remembered from our early 20s. Broad shoulders slumped in practiced defeat, dark hair, artfully messy eyes, wide and brimming with a carefully manufactured vulnerability. He held a mug of coffee in both hands, offering it like a peace treaty. "Hey," he whispered, his voice thick with a perfectly calibrated tremor. "You're awake. I let you sleep in. You seemed restless." I stared at him, really stared. It was jarring to see him, without the smug, self-satisfied grin he had worn as he stood over my hospital bed in my final hours. Back then, 10 years from now, he had already secured the bag. He had my kidney keeping his blood clean, and he had my life insurance policy keeping his bank account full. He and Mia had barely even tried to hide their affair at the end. They had stood in the corridor, right outside my door, discussing their honeymoon in Bali, while the sepsis ravaged what was left of my body. Now, he was playing the tragic hero, the sick fiancé, relying on the absolute devotion of his loving partner. "Chloe." He stepped closer, his brow furrowing. "Are you okay? You look pale." "I'm fine," I said. The words tasted like ash. My voice was steady, shockingly so. I swung my legs over the edge of the bed, planting my bare feet on the cheap linoleum floor. It felt solid, real. He sat down beside me, close enough that I could smell his body wash. My stomach violently rebelled, but I swallowed the bile. He reached out his warm, calloused fingers, wrapping over mine. "The hospital called this morning," he said softly, staring down at our joined hands. "Dr. Evans has all the final paperwork ready. The cross-match is perfect, Chloe. You're really going to save my life." He looked up at me, his eyes shining with unshed tears. It was an Oscar-worthy performance. If I hadn't lived through the next 10 years, I would have melted. I would have kissed his forehead, told him I loved him, and marched myself straight onto the operating table, like an obedient lamb. "Paperwork," I repeated flatly. "Yeah." He squeezed my hand. "My mom wants to meet us at the clinic tomorrow morning, just to be there when we sign. She's so grateful to you, Chloe." She was crying on the phone. We all are. Barbara, the woman who had treated me like dirt under her shoe until she found out my blood type was compatible with her precious sons. The woman who later helped Liam funnel my savings into a joint account with Mia. I gently pulled my hand out from under his. I needed space. I needed to not be touching him, or I was going to wrap my fingers around his throat and squeeze until his eyes bulged. "Tomorrow morning," I said, standing up and turning my back to him. I walked over to the closet, pulling out a pair of jeans. "Sure, let's go tomorrow." "You're an angel," Liam murmured, getting up to wrap his arms around me from behind. He pressed a kiss to my shoulder. "I don't deserve you." "No," I said, quietly staring at our reflection in the cracked mirror on the closet door. My eyes were cold, dead. "You really don't," he chuckled, missing the absolute freezing truth in my tone. He thought I was being modest. He thought he had me completely, totally secured. He walked out of the bedroom, humming softly, practically skipping, with the relief of a man who had successfully conned his way into a second chance at life. I stood alone in the room, my hands gripping the edges of the dresser until my knuckles turned white. He wanted my kidney. He wanted my future. He wasn't getting a damn thing. Morning broke with a relentless, cheerful glare that felt entirely inappropriate for the execution I was about to attend. Mine originally, now his. The drive to the clinic was suffocating. Liam drove his left hand casually draped over the steering wheel, his right hand resting on my thigh. Every few minutes his phone buzzed in the cup holder. The screen would light up, revealing a text from an unsaved number. "Thinking of you today. Be strong. Can't wait until this is over. Mia." She didn't even have the decency to wait until I was unconscious before texting him. In my past life, Liam had told me the texts were from his overly anxious cousin. I had believed him. I had been so desperate to be the perfect supportive partner that I ignored every glaring red flag waving violently in my face. "Nervous?" Liam asked, glancing over at me. "Just thinking about the future," I replied. It wasn't a lie. I was meticulously planning exactly how I was going to dismantle him. "It'll be over before you know it," he promised, giving my thigh a reassuring squeeze. "A few days of recovery, and then we have the rest of our lives. I'm going to make this up to you, Chloe. Every single day." I smiled. It was a sharp, brittle thing, but it satisfied him. We pulled into the clinic parking lot. Barbara was already waiting by the front entrance, pacing like a caged panther. The moment she spotted our car, she practically sprinted over. She wore a tailored beige suit, her hair perfectly coiffed, looking less like a mother, worried about her son's failing organs, and more like a real estate agent, ready to close a lucrative deal. "Liam's sweetheart," she cooed, throwing her arms around his neck the second he stepped out of the car. She kissed both his cheeks, fussing over his jacket. Then, as if suddenly remembering I existed, she turned to me. The warmth vanished from her eyes, replaced by a calculating, sterile assessment. "Chloe, you're on time. Good." "Hello, Barbara," I said, keeping my hands stuffed in my jacket pockets to avoid hugging her. She frowned slightly at the perceived slight, but brushed past it. "Let's go inside. Dr. Evans is expecting us." We don't want to keep the surgical coordinator waiting. The clinic smelled of bleach and expensive potpourri. We were ushered into a private office at the end of a long, quiet hallway. A woman in a navy blouse sat behind a massive mahogany desk, smiling warmly as we entered. Thick stacks of paper lay neatly arranged in front of her. "Welcome, Liam Chloe," the coordinator said, gesturing to the chairs opposite her. Barbara immediately took the chair closest to the desk, leaving Liam and me to take the remaining two. Today is about finalizing the consent. We've gone over the medical risks previously, but the law requires us to ensure that the donor is acting completely of their own free will, without any financial or emotional coercion. She looked directly at me. Her gaze was kind professional. "Chloe, do you understand the risks associated with a nephrectomy? You will be living with one kidney. While most donors lead perfectly normal lives, there are risks of complications, both during surgery and long-term." "I understand," I said. My voice was a low, steady hum. Barbara shifted impatiently in her seat. Yes, we've been over all of this. She knows. Let's just get the signatures. Liam needs to go home and rest." The coordinator shot Barbara a polite but firm look before sliding a blue folder across the desk toward me. She placed a heavy silver pen on top of it. "Take your time reading it over one last time," she said softly. "When you are ready, sign at the bottom of the last 3 pages." Liam leaned in his shoulder, pressing against mine. "This is it," he whispered, his voice trembling with manufactured awe. "Thank you, Chloe." I stared down at the folder. The paper was thick, official, a death warrant masquerading as a medical document. I reached out and picked up the silver pen. It felt cold and heavy in my fingers. I rolled it between my thumb and forefinger, feeling the engraved texture. Barbara was practically vibrating with anticipation. Liam was holding his breath. I set the pen down. It landed on the desk with a sharp clack. Silence stretched through the room, thick and sudden. Liam blinked, looking from the pen to my face. "Chloe, what's wrong? Is it the pen? Does it not work?" "The pen is fine," I said. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms over my chest. I looked directly into Liam's eyes, stripping away every ounce of warmth, every ounce of the blind devotion I had carried for years. "I'm not signing it." For a second, nobody moved. The air in the room seemed to solidify. "What?" Liam breathed a nervous smile, twitching at the corner of his mouth. "Come on, Chloe. Don't joke like that. Not right now." "I'm not joking." I kept my voice entirely conversational, as if we were discussing the weather. "I've changed my mind. I am not donating my kidney to you." "Excuse me," Barbara shrieked. The pristine facade shattered instantly. She bolted upright, her chair scraping violently against the hardwood floor. "What do you mean you're not doing it? The surgery is in 5 days. Everything is scheduled." The coordinator raised her hands defensively. "Please, ma'am, calm down. The donor has the absolute right to back out at any time, right up until anesthesia is administered." "She can't back out." Barbara slammed her hands down on the desk, pointing a manicured finger at my face. "She promised my son is dying, you selfish little bitch." "Mom, stop." Liam grabbed her arm, his face pale panic finally bleeding through his perfectly constructed mask. He turned to me, dropping to his knees, right there on the clinic floor. He grabbed my hands, gripping them so tight it hurt. "Chloe, please, talk to me. Are you scared? It's normal to be scared. But you know I need this. Without this, I go back on dialysis. I'll die. You wouldn't let me die, would you?" I looked down at him, the man who had kissed another woman while my heart stopped, the man who had celebrated my death. He looked so pathetic, kneeling there. "I guess you'd better start looking for another match, Liam," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper, meant only for him. "Maybe your cousin Mia can get tested. I hear you two are very close." The color drained completely from his face. His jaw went slack, his hands going limp around mine. He stared up at me in absolute unadulterated terror. He knew that I knew. I stood up, brushing past his kneeling form. I didn't look at Barbara, who was hyperventilating by the desk. I didn't look at the coordinator, who sat in stunned silence. I walked out of the office, down the bleached hallway, and pushed through the heavy glass doors into the bright morning sun. The cold autumn air hit my face, filling my lungs. I took a deep breath, feeling the expansion of my chest, the healthy rhythm of my own beating heart. I was whole, and I was just getting started. Adrenaline is a funny thing. It masks the pain of a severed limb, and it certainly masks the phantom ache of a betrayal that hasn't fully happened yet. By the time I parallel parked my bruised Honda Civic outside our apartment building, my hands had finally stopped shaking. I didn't have a plan, not a meticulous step-by-step one anyway. All I had was an overwhelming primal instinct to purge Liam from my existence. I took the stairs two at a time. The moment I unlocked the front door, I grabbed a stack of flattened cardboard boxes from the recycling bin in the hallway. I had exactly 45 minutes before they recovered from the shock at the clinic and came hunting for me. First, the bedroom. I didn't bother folding anything. I ripped my clothes off the hangers, tossing them into the bottom of a box. Jean sweaters, the silk dress I wore on our anniversary. It all went in. Next was the bathroom. Toothbrush skincare, the expensive cologne I had bought Liam for his birthday, which I unceremoniously dumped down the sink. The sharp scent of bergamot and cedar filled the small room, masking the smell of mildew. My phone buzzed constantly on the edge of the sink. 7 missed calls from Liam, 4 from Barbara, 2 texts from numbers I didn't recognize. Likely aunts or cousins recruited to guilt-trip me. I turned the phone on silent and shoved it into my back pocket. The real task was the laptop. I flipped it open on the kitchen island, my fingers flying across the keys. 10 years in the future, I had died with exactly $4 in my checking account because Liam had drained everything to cover out-of-network specialists, which was actually just code for Mia's new Audi. Not this time. I logged into our joint savings account. The balance sat at a comfortable $42,000. My money. Money I had saved from pulling double shifts at the graphic design firm while Liam focused on his health and played video games. I opened a new tab, created an entirely separate account under a different bank, and initiated a wire transfer for the entire amount. Every single penny. I watched the loading wheel spin. 3 seconds. 5. Transfer complete. The joint balance dropped to 0. I slammed the laptop shut and shoved it into my backpack, just as heavy, frantic fists started pounding on the front door. "Chloe, open this door right now." Barbara's voice was shrill, completely unhinged. She rattled the doorknob. "I know you're in there. Your car is outside." I zipped up my backpack, slung it over one shoulder, and grabbed the heaviest box of my belongings. I walked to the door, unlocked the deadbolt, and pulled it open. Barbara nearly stumbled inside. Her face was flushed and ugly mottled red, the veins in her neck straining against her pearl necklace. Liam stood behind her, looking pale and completely lost. The aggressive banging didn't suit his carefully cultivated aesthetic of the tragic suffering patient. "Going somewhere," Barbara sneered, stepping into the entryway and blocking my path. She looked at the cardboard box in my hands, then at the empty hangers visible through the open bedroom door. "You think you can just pack up and walk away after everything Liam has done for you?" "I think I just did," I said, my voice eerily calm. I shifted the box in my arms. "Move, Barbara. You're blocking the door. I have half a mind to call the police," she hissed, stepping closer. Her expensive perfume was suffocating. "You made a commitment, a verbal contract. You promised my son a kidney, and you led us on for months. Do you know how much money we've spent preparing for this? I have a lawyer, Chloe. A very good one. We will sue you for emotional distress, for medical negligence, for breach of contract." I actually laughed. It bubbled up from my chest, loud and completely genuine. "Medical negligence. I'm not his Dr. Barbara. I'm his ex-fiance. And as for a verbal contract on my internal organs, please call your lawyer right now. I'd love to hear a judge laugh you out of the courtroom." Liam pushed past his mother. He reached for my arm, his eyes wide, pleading. "Chloe, please. Stop. Don't do this. We can talk about this. If you're angry, just tell me why. Did I do something wrong? Is it my mom? I'll tell her to back off, I swear." "Don't touch me," I said, stepping back so quickly his fingers grasped empty air. "Chloe, I'm dying." His voice cracked. A single tear rolled down his cheek. 10 years ago, that tear would have broken me. It would have sent me crawling back, begging for forgiveness, for my selfishness. Now all I saw was a sociopath trying to manipulate his way back to the feeding trough. "Then, you better hop on the transplant list," I said, my tone flat. "Because you're not getting mine." And Liam, he looked up, a spark of desperate hope in his eyes. "Check your banking app," I told him. "I took my money back. The joint account is closed." The confusion on his face slowly morphed into sheer, unadulterated panic. He fumbled in his jacket pocket, pulling out his phone. His thumbs scrambled across the screen. Barbara watched him, her brow furrowing. "What does she mean, Liam?" Barbara demanded. "What money?" Liam stared at his phone screen. His mouth opened and closed, like a fish suffocating on dry land. "It's gone. She took all of it. It was my money." I reminded them both, stepping past a paralyzed Barbara and walking out into the hallway. "Every dime of it was from my paycheck. You can keep the security deposit. Use it to buy your cousin Mia something nice." I didn't look back as I walked down the hall. I could hear Barbara screaming my name, threatening to destroy me, threatening to ruin my life. It was just noise, meaningless, desperate noise, from people who had finally realized their favorite victim had just bitten off the leash. Rumors travel fast, but manufactured outrage breaks the sound barrier. By noon the next day, I was officially the villain of Liam's carefully constructed tragedy. I was staying in a mid-range hotel by the interstate, ignoring the awful floral wallpaper and focusing entirely on the digital bloodbath playing out on my screen. Liam had taken to social media. He posted a photo of himself in a hospital gown, an old picture from a routine checkup months ago, no doubt looking pale and defeated. The caption was a masterpiece of emotional manipulation. "I never thought a broken heart would kill me faster than my failing kidneys. Yesterday, the woman I loved, the woman who promised to save my life, abandoned me on the eve of our transplant. No explanation, just packed her bags and left me to die. I don't know how much time I have left, but I ask for your prayers. Below it, a link to a GoFundMe campaign set up by Barbara. My phone battery was dying from the sheer volume of hate messages pouring in from mutual friends, college acquaintances, and people I hadn't spoken to in years. How do you sleep at night? You're a monster. I hope you rot in hell, Chloe. I scrolled through the comments, eating a lukewarm French fry from room service. I felt completely detached, like I was watching a true crime documentary about someone else's life. In my previous life, public opinion mattered to me. I had wanted people to think I was kind, selfless, and loving. Now I knew that being a martyr only ended with you bleeding out, while everyone else applauded your sacrifice. Let them hate me. Let them think I was the devil. The devil still gets to keep both her kidneys. A sharp knock at the hotel room door broke my concentration. I paused, chewing, slowly. I hadn't told anyone where I was. I had booked the room under my company corporate account, which meant only my boss knew the location, and maybe one other person who had a habit of snooping through my emails when I used Liam's iPad. I walked to the door and peered through the peephole. Mia. She stood in the hallway, clutching a designer handbag that I knew for a fact Liam had bought her for her birthday, using my credit card. She wore a tailored trench coat and an expression of profound, righteous fury. I undid the chain and pulled the door open, leaning against the frame. "Well," I said, raising an eyebrow, "if it isn't the grieving cousin." Mia sneered, stepping forward, as if she intended to push her way inside. I didn't budge, effectively blocking her path. She was shorter than me, with perfectly highlighted blonde hair and wide, innocent eyes that she weaponized expertly. "How could you do this?" Mia demanded, her voice shaking with theatrical anger. "He is dying, Chloe. He loved you, and you just left him there, like he was garbage." "Oh, stop," I sighed, rubbing my temples. "Liam isn't here, Mia. You don't have to do the concerned family member routine. We both know you're not his cousin." Mia froze. The righteous anger faltered, replaced by a flicker of genuine shock. She recovered quickly, her eyes narrowing. "I don't know what paranoid delusions you're suffering from, but Liam needs that kidney. You owe it to him. You made a promise." "I don't owe him a damn thing," I said smoothly. "But if you're so worried about his failing health, why don't you get tested? You love him, right? You two are planning a future together. Give him one of yours." Her face went completely blank. For a second, the mask slipped entirely, and I saw the cold, hard selfishness underneath, the exact same selfishness that mirrored Liam's. "I can't," she stammered, taking a half step back. "I'm not a match. You haven't even been tested." I countered, crossing my arms. "I saw the medical files, Mia. You didn't even do the blood draw. You want him alive, but you want me to pay the price. You want me to be the donor, so you can swoop in, play the supportive girlfriend, and reap the benefits." "You're insane," she whispered, her hands tightening around the straps of her handbag. "Am I?" I reached into the pocket of my jeans and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I had printed it at the hotel business center that morning. I unfolded it and held it up to her face. It was a screenshot of a hotel booking confirmation. A luxury villa in Bali, booked for 3 weeks in November. The primary guest was Liam. The secondary guest was Mia. "You guys planned a lovely honeymoon," I noted, watching the color drain from her face. "Right in the middle of my projected surgical recovery time. Tell me, Mia, were you planning on sending me a postcard while I was stuck in bed with a catheter? Or were you just going to wait until I died of sepsis to post the beach photos? She swallowed hard, staring at the paper as if it were a live snake. You hacked his email. I didn't have to. He left his iPad logged in. I lied smoothly. I actually knew about Bali from the previous timeline, where I had found the brochure stuffed in his hospital bag right before I crashed. Here's the problem, Mia. The Bali trip was booked on the credit card linked to our joint account. The account I just emptied. Her eyes snapped up to mine, wide and horrified. The trip is going to bounce. The GoFundMe money isn't going to cover his medical debt, let alone a luxury vacation. Liam is broke, he's sick, and he has nothing left to offer you. I smiled a genuine, terrifying smile. He's all yours, Mia. Have fun nursing him. I stepped back and slammed the hotel door right in her face, locking the deadbolt with a resounding click. I walked back to the bed, picked up my lukewarm fries, and sat down. The smear campaign was annoying, sure, but exposing a rat to the sinking ship was far more entertaining. Room service trays piled up in the hallway outside my door. For 48 hours, I existed on bad coffee, cold toast, and the cold blue light of my laptop screen. My phone rang at 8 a.m. on Wednesday. The caller ID flashed my boss's name. Greg was a decent man, entirely too focused on quarterly margins to care about my personal life, which made this phone call incredibly predictable. Chloe. Greg sighed, his voice heavy with the exhaustion of a man who had been dealing with a PR nightmare before his morning commute. Are you watching the company's Facebook page? No, I said, leaning back against the stiff hotel pillows. But I can guess. We've received 300 one-star reviews since yesterday. People are calling the front desk, demanding we fire you. Someone even tagged the local news. He paused, the silence stretching uncomfortably. I know this is a personal matter. I know Liam is. Well, he's very sick, but this is bleeding into the business. I understand, I replied, keeping my voice steady. I have 2 weeks of accrued vacation time. I'll take it starting today. It will blow over by the time I get back. Take 3, Greg said quietly. Just sort this out, Chloe. Whatever this is. The line clicked dead. I tossed the phone onto the mattress. Liam's smear campaign was efficient. I had to give him that. He knew exactly which strings to pull to paint himself as the ultimate victim. The GoFundMe had crossed $20,000 overnight. The internet loves a tragic hero, especially one with failing organs and a supposedly cruel, heartless ex-fiance. It was time to introduce them to the villain. I dressed in sharp, dark clothes. I didn't want to look like a victim. I wanted to look like an executioner. My first stop was a local print shop. I handed the clerk a thumb drive and waited while the heavy commercial printer spit out stack after stack of documents. Bank statements, credit card logs, the Bali itinerary, a screenshot of a text message Liam had sent Mia 3 months ago, which I had forwarded to myself before leaving the apartment. I know the wait is agonizing, babe. Just let Chloe do the surgery and then we are free. I promise. My second stop was a narrow brick building downtown. Arthur Collins was a lawyer who specialized in defamation and civil litigation. He had a reputation for being entirely devoid of empathy, which was precisely what I needed. I sat in his leather armchair and slid a thick manila folder across his desk. Arthur adjusted his reading glasses, opening the file. He flipped through the first few pages in silence. The only sound in the office was the ticking of a grandfather clock in the corner. Your ex-fiancé is publicly accusing you of abandoning him on his deathbed. Arthur stated, his tone dry. He's soliciting donations based on the premise that your departure has left him financially destitute. Correct. And these documents, Arthur tapped the stack of bank statements, prove that you were the sole breadwinner for the last 2 years, while he used joint funds to finance an affair. Also correct. Sigh, the GoFundMe campaign. Arthur murmured, pulling out the Bali itinerary. He states the funds are for medical expenses, but he has a non-refundable $25,000 vacation booked for next month. Wire fraud? I suggested, mildly. Arthur looked up over the rim of his glasses. A faint, predatory smile touched the corners of his mouth. At the very least, it's a violation of the platform's terms of service. At worst, it's a felony. What is your objective, Chloe? I want the campaign shut down, I said, leaning forward. I want a cease and desist issued to Liam and his mother regarding my name, my employment, and my character. And I want to draft a public response. Legally, airtight. I can have the platform freeze the funds by noon. Arthur said, reaching for his dictaphone. The cease and desist will be served by a process server before dinner. As for the public response, we deal in facts, no emotion. We post the timeline, the financial discrepancies, and the proof of infidelity. Do it. I left his office, feeling lighter. The suffocating weight of the internet's hatred didn't disappear, but it shifted. It wasn't crushing me anymore. It was fuel. By 2 p.m., the tide began to turn. Arthur's firm released a statement on my behalf. It was a masterpiece of legal evisceration. It didn't call Liam a liar. It simply provided the receipts. The bank statements showing my deposits and his withdrawals. The luxury purchases made for Mia. The text messages. 30 minutes later, the GoFundMe page vanished, replaced by a sterile gray banner. This fundraiser is under investigation. I sat in my rental car in the parking lot of a diner, watching the comments on Liam's original Facebook post change in real time. The same people who had been wishing for my death that morning were now demanding answers from him. Hey man, is it true you booked a trip to Bali with your cousin? Where did the GoFundMe money go? Liam, you cheated on the woman giving you a kidney. You're sick. My phone vibrated in the cup holder. Liam, what did you do? The money is frozen. My mom is freaking out. Liam, Chloe, answer me. Mia is packing her bags. She saw the post. I typed out a response, my thumbs moving methodically across the screen. Me, I told you. Check your banking app. She's not a cousin, and you're not a victim. Have a nice life, Liam. I blocked his number. I blocked Barbara's number. I blocked Mia's number. I threw the car into drive and pulled out of the parking lot. The phantom ache in my side was completely gone. Panic strips a person down to their studs. When you strip away the charm, the manipulation, and the practiced victimhood, all that was left of Liam was a terrified, hollow shell. It took him 3 days to track me down. I had moved from the hotel to a short-term corporate lease, a secure building with a doorman who took his job seriously. Unfortunately, Liam didn't come to my apartment. He waited outside the grocery store 3 blocks away. It was raining a cold, miserable autumn drizzle that soaked through the shoulders of my jacket. I was carrying a single paper bag of groceries when he stepped out from the shadow of a bus stop shelter. Chloe, I stopped. He looked awful, truly, undeniably yuck. The stress of the last few days had accelerated his decline. His skin held a grayish, jaundiced tint, and there were dark bruised hollows under his eyes. He was hunched over, shivering in a thin jacket. For a fraction of a second, a ghost of my old self, the woman who had loved him, who had cooked his meals and rubbed his back when the dialysis exhausted him, twitched in my chest. But then, I remembered the sterile hospital ceiling. I remembered dying alone. "You shouldn't be out in the rain, Liam," I said. My voice wasn't angry. It was empty. "Your immune system can't handle it." "Mia left," he blurted out, ignoring my comment. His teeth were actually chattering. "She took the designer bags and left. She said she didn't sign up to be a nurse. I told you she wouldn't stay." I adjusted my grip on the grocery bag. "Move out of my way." "No, wait, please." He lunged forward, grabbing my forearm. His grip was weak, trembling. "Chloe, they froze the account. The hospital is talking about dropping me from the active transplant list because my mom screamed at the transplant coordinator. Everything is falling apart. Actions meet consequences," I said, prying his fingers off my jacket. "I'm not your problem solver anymore." "I'm sorry," he cried, the tears mixing with the rain on his face. "I am so sorry. I was stupid. I was scared. And Mia was she was a distraction. It didn't mean anything. You're the one I love. You're the one who was going to save me. Don't insult my intelligence." I snapped, the cold neutrality finally cracking. "You didn't love me. You loved what I could provide. A bank account, a house, a spare organ. You looked at me and saw a walking spare parts shop. That's not true. You were going to let me go into surgery while you planned your honeymoon." I shouted the sound, echoing off the wet pavement. A few pedestrians turned to look, but I didn't care. "You were going to take my money and my kidney and leave me to rot. Don't you dare stand here and tell me you loved me." Liam shrank back, sobbing openly now. "I don't want to die, Chloe. Please. I'll do anything. I'll sign a contract. I'll pay you back every cent. My mom will take out a second mortgage. Just, please, call the clinic. Tell them it was a misunderstanding." A sleek black SUV abruptly pulled up to the curb, its tires splashing muddy water against my boots. The passenger window rolled down, revealing Barbara's furious, panicked face. "Liam, get in the car," she barked. Then she locked eyes with me. The haughty arrogance was entirely gone, replaced by a frantic, ugly desperation. "Chloe, please. Name your price. 50,000, 100. I will find the money. Just give him the kidney." I looked at Barbara, then down at Liam, who was staring up at me like I was God. "You really don't get it," I said softly, stepping back from the curb. "Both of you. You think everything in this world can be bought bullied or stolen." I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone, tapping the screen to stop the voice recording I had started the moment Liam approached me. "You can't buy my organs, Barbara," I said, holding the phone up and attempting to offer me financial compensation, for a kidney is a federal offense under the National Organ Transplant Act. I'm sending this recording to my lawyer and to the National Transplant Registry. Barbara's mouth dropped open in mute horror. "You're not just off the priority list now." I looked down at Liam, who had slumped against the bus shelter, his face buried in his hands. "You're off the list entirely." I turned my back on them and walked away. The rain washed the lingering scent of his cologne off my clothes. For the first time in a decade, I was finally breathing my own air. Unpacking groceries had never felt like a victory lap. I set the damp paper bag on the granite counter of my temporary apartment and pulled out the items one by one. Honeycrisp apples, a block of sharp cheddar, a bottle of mid-tier Cabernet. I wasn't buying low-sodium broth or renal-friendly diet foods anymore. For 2 years, my entire pantry had revolved around Liam's failing kidneys. I had policed my own diet in solidarity, giving up coffee alcohol and anything heavily processed, just so he wouldn't feel left out. I grabbed a corkscrew from the drawer and opened the wine. The cork popped with a satisfying thwack. I poured a heavy glass and took a slow, deliberate sip. It burned slightly, going down rich and complex. I closed my eyes and let the warmth spread through my chest. My phone chimed from the living room sofa, a sharp, crisp ping that cut through the silence. I carried my glass over and checked the screen. It was an email from Arthur Collins. Subject update. National Transplant Registry / GoFundMe action. I sat down on the edge of the cushions and read through the dense legal jargon. Arthur was a machine. He hadn't just sent the audio recording to the transplant board. He had filed a formal complaint of coercion and illegal financial solicitation for human organs. Attached to the email was a scanned copy of a letter from the Regional Transplant Authority. It was addressed to Liam's primary nephrologist. Due to documented attempts to purchase an organ, Liam was officially suspended from the transplant waitlist, pending a full ethics review. I scrolled down further. The second half of Arthur's email dealt with the GoFundMe campaign. The platform had completed their internal review. Because the funds were solicited under fraudulent pretenses, claiming abandonment and financial ruin, while simultaneously harboring $25,000 in a hidden vacation fund, the campaign was permanently deactivated. Every single donation was being automatically refunded to the contributors. Furthermore, the platform's legal team had forwarded the case file to the state attorney general's office for potential wire fraud charges. I locked the phone screen and set it face down on the coffee table. There was no triumph, no sudden euphoric rush of victory, just a quiet hollow settling of the dust. I had dismantled his life entirely. I had taken away his money, his mistress, his public sympathy, and his place in line for a life-saving organ. In my previous life, doing something like this would have broken my brain. I would have laid awake for weeks, agonizing over the morality of it, weeping over his suffering. Now I just felt a profound, heavy fatigue, the kind of bone-deep exhaustion that comes from carrying a parasite for too long. I walked to the window and looked out over the city. The rain was still falling, blurring the streetlights into streaks of gold and red. Down there, somewhere in the sprawl, Liam was likely hooked up to a dialysis machine, watching his blood cycle through plastic tubing. His mother was probably pacing the halls of a hospital, screaming at nurses who no longer had any patience for her entitlement. The following Tuesday, I decided it was time to go back to work. Hiding in the corporate apartment was a temporary measure, a tactical retreat, while the internet outrage burned itself out. And burnout it did. The moment Arthur had posted the receipts, the public mob had abruptly changed direction. The internet is a fickle beast. It loves a witch hunt, but it loves catching a hypocrite even more. Liam's social media accounts had been deleted entirely by Friday. Unable to withstand the sheer volume of vitriol pouring into his comment section, I walked into the design firm at 8:45. The lobby was quiet, smelling of ozone from the heavy-duty printers and fresh coffee. My heels clicked against the polished concrete floor. A few heads popped up from over the cubicle dividers as I made my way toward my desk. There were whispers, of course. A few awkward nods. Greg intercepted me before I could even log into my computer. He stood in the doorway of his glass-walled office, holding a ceramic mug. He looked me up and down, taking in the tailored blazer and the sharp, unbothered expression on my face. "You're back early," Greg noted, taking a sip of his coffee. "I was getting bored," I replied, dropping my bag onto my chair. "And I have 3 client campaigns that need final approval by Friday. I assume you didn't reassign them." "I didn't." He stepped out of his office and leaned against the edge of my desk. He lowered his voice. "I saw the statement your lawyer put out. The financial documents. I told you I would sort it out." Greg nodded slowly. "You did. For the record, Chloe, I'm sorry about all of it. Dealing with a sick partner is hard enough without the rest of that mess. I appreciate it, Greg, but I'm moving forward. I'd prefer to just focus on the work." "Good." He tapped his knuckles against the desk. "Welcome back. We have a creative brief meeting in 10 minutes. Conference room B." Work became my anchor. I dove into the typography, the color palettes, the consumer demographics. I built campaigns for boutique coffee roasters and local tech startups. I stayed late, not because I was avoiding my empty apartment, but because I genuinely enjoyed the hum of the quiet office. I was reclaiming my own brain space. For years, my creative energy had been entirely drained by Liam's medical schedule. I had been living in a perpetual state of triage. Now, my mind felt sharp, expansive. 2 weeks passed without a single word from Liam, Barbara, or Mia. It was a suffocatingly quiet peace. I knew it wouldn't last. Cornered animals don't just lay down and die quietly. They lash out. They look for a weak point. I checked my rear-view mirror every time I drove. I made sure the doorman at my building had strict instructions not to let anyone up without my explicit verbal confirmation over the intercom. The break in the silence didn't come in the form of an ambush in a dark parking lot. It came in the form of a thick, heavy envelope delivered by certified mail to my desk at work. I signed for it, feeling the rigid cardboard beneath my fingertips. I sat in my chair, staring at the return address. It wasn't from Arthur. It was from a law firm I didn't recognize. I grabbed a pair of scissors and sliced the top of the envelope open. A thick stack of documents slid out onto my desk. I flipped to the first page. It was a civil summons. Barbara was suing me. Not for breach of contract on the kidney. Arthur had already made it clear that was a dead end. She was suing me for intentional infliction of emotional distress, defamation, and financial damages resulting from the closure of the GoFundMe account. She was demanding $2 million. I read the opening paragraphs, my eyes scanning the absurd, desperate accusations. She claimed my public release of the bank statements had caused Liam severe psychological trauma, which directly accelerated his physical decline. She claimed I had illegally accessed his private electronic devices to obtain the Bali itinerary. I picked up my phone and dialed Arthur's number. Collins, his gravelly voice, answered on the second ring. "Arthur, Barbara just served me with a civil suit for $2 million. I heard the rustle of papers on his end, followed by a low, dark chuckle. "I know. I received a courtesy copy this morning from her representation, a bottom-feeding firm that operates entirely on contingency. They take desperate cases for desperate people. She says I hacked his iPad. She can say you colluded with aliens," Arthur replied dryly. "Proving it in discovery is an entirely different matter. Did you hack the device?" "No." He left it logged in on the kitchen counter. Then there is no expectation of privacy. This lawsuit is a shakedown, Chloe. It's a dying gasp. They have no money, no leverage, and no public sympathy. They are hoping you will settle out of court just to make it go away. I'm not settling for a single dime. I didn't think so, Arthur said, the sound of his keyboard clacking rapidly in the background. I will file a motion to dismiss with prejudice by tomorrow morning. But be prepared, Chloe. If the judge doesn't throw it out immediately, we will have to go to a deposition. You will have to sit in a room with them. Let them come, I said. My voice was steady, hard as flint. I've already died for them once. I'm not afraid of a deposition. Fluorescent lights buzz at a very specific frequency. It's a low, aggressive hum that crawls under your skin and settles right at the base of your skull. I sat in a leather chair in the conference room of Arthur Collins's firm, staring at the polished mahogany table, listening to that buzz. Arthur sat beside me, meticulously arranging his legal pads. He wore a navy suit that probably cost more than my car, and his demeanor was terrifyingly calm. Across the table, 3 empty chairs waited. Remember, Arthur murmured, without looking up from his notes, you only answer the question asked. Do not elaborate. Do not volunteer information. Do not let her goad you. Barbara's counsel will try to paint you as a vindictive, scorned woman who weaponized a medical crisis. Let them try. We hold the facts. I know, I said. My pulse was steady. I had spent the last month preparing for this exact moment. The heavy oak door swung open. A court reporter walked in first, setting up her steno machine in the corner with practiced efficiency. Then came Barbara's lawyer, a slick-looking man in a shiny gray suit who carried a briefcase that looked entirely too empty. And then came Barbara. She pushed a wheelchair into the room. I didn't recognize him at first. Liam had lost at least 30 pounds. His cheekbones jutted out sharply beneath paper-thin, sallow skin. His hair, usually thick and perfectly styled, was thinning and lank. An oxygen cannula rested under his nose, the clear plastic tubing snaking down to a small tank secured to the back of the chair. He looked like a fragile, hollowed-out bird. He didn't look up. He stared blankly at his own hands, which rested limply in his lap. His knuckles were bruised, likely from blown IV lines. Barbara, on the other hand, was vibrating with a chaotic, manic energy. She looked awful. Her roots were showing gray. Her makeup was unblended, and the expensive beige suit hung loosely on her frame. She locked eyes with me the moment she walked in her gaze, carrying a toxic mix of absolute hatred and wild desperation. She parked Liam's wheelchair at the table and aggressively pulled out a chair for herself. The deposition began. The court reporter swore me in her fingers, flying over the strange keys of her machine. Barbara's lawyer, a man named Mr. Davis, started with the basic establishing questions. Name occupation, length of relationship with the plaintiff. I answered them in short, flat syllables. Yes, no, 5 years. Ms. Davis, the lawyer, began leaning forward and resting his elbows on the table. Can you describe the events of October 15th, the day you allegedly terminated your engagement and withdrew your consent for the organ donation? I went to the clinic, I said. I read the consent forms. I chose not to sign them. I informed Liam of my decision, and I left. And your reasoning for this sudden reversal? Davis pressed his tone, dripping with skepticism. After months of preparation testing and verbal assurances, I discovered he was having an affair and using our joint finances to fund it. I stated clearly, I realized he did not view me as a partner, but as a biological resource. Barbara scoffed loudly, a harsh, ugly sound. Arthur didn't even blink. He just casually tapped his pen against his legal pad. Objection, Arthur said mildly. Relevance. The plaintiff's infidelity is already a matter of public record, and my client's reasoning for bodily autonomy does not require justification under the law. Davis ignored him. Did you or did you not intentionally release private financial documents to the public with the explicit goal of ruining Liam's reputation and destroying his GoFundMe campaign? I released documents to correct a false narrative. I replied, looking directly at Liam. He still wouldn't look up. Liam publicly accused me of leaving him financially destitute. I provided proof that I was the one who had been financially exploited. The GoFundMe was shut down by the platform because it violated their terms regarding fraud. Fraud, Barbara shrieked, slamming her hand down on the table. The court reporter flinched. We needed that money to keep him alive. You stole it from him. You stole his life. Mrs. Davis, control yourself, or I will end this deposition right now. Arthur warned, his voice dropping to a dangerous baritone. Don't you tell me to control myself. Barbara lunged out of her chair, pointing a trembling finger at my face. Tears of absolute rage spilled over her cheeks. Look at him. Look at my son. He is dying. He is dying because of you. You have 2 healthy kidneys. You selfish, vindictive little bitch. You're just going to sit there and watch him die. I didn't shrink back. I didn't lower my eyes. I looked at the frantic, screaming woman. And then I looked at the man in the wheelchair. Liam finally raised his head. His eyes were bloodshot, surrounded by dark, bruised flesh. He looked at me, and for the first time, there was no manipulation. There was no practiced charm or manufactured tears. There was just absolute, unadulterated terror. He knew his time was up. He knew the dialysis was failing. He knew his mother's screaming wouldn't change his blood chemistry. He isn't dying because of me, Barbara, I said. My voice was incredibly quiet, but it carried perfectly across the mahogany table. He's dying because his kidneys failed. I didn't make him sick. I just refused to set myself on fire to keep him warm. You promised, she wailed, clutching the edge of the table. You promised him, and he promised to love and respect me. I countered the words, cold, imprecise, as a scalpel. He broke his promise first, and unlike a kidney, loyalty isn't something you can just extract from someone else when yours runs out. I looked back at Liam. He opened his mouth, his lips trembling, but no sound came out. He just let his head fall forward, burying his face in his hands. A low, pathetic sob shuddered through his frail shoulders. This deposition is over, Arthur announced, closing his legal pad with a definitive snap. Mr. Davis, if you don't withdraw this frivolous suit by tomorrow morning, I will file for sanctions against your firm for wasting the court's time, and I will countersue for legal fees. Arthur stood up, buttoning his suit jacket. He gestured toward the door. Chloe, we're leaving. I stood up. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't look back at the sobbing mother or the dying son. I walked out of the conference room, out of the law firm, and stepped onto the busy city sidewalk. The sun was shining. The air smelled of exhaust fumes and hot pavement, a sharp, gritty contrast to the sterile air of the clinic from a month ago. I took a deep breath, feeling my chest expand. feeling the solid, heavy rhythm of my own heart beating in my own chest. I survived him. I had crawled out of my own grave and walked away. He would face his own ending in a cold hospital bed, surrounded by the consequences of his own greed, and I would face my beginning, completely whole, completely free. If you've ever had to walk away from someone who tried to drain the life right out of you, drop a comment below and hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel to hear the final conclusion of this story, and share this video with a friend who needs a reminder that no is a complete sentence. Until next time, stay strong and protect your peace. Winter arrived with a brutal, unforgiving freeze that turned the city into a grid of gray slush and salt-stained sidewalks. I bought a pair of expensive running shoes and started jogging along the Riverwalk every morning. It was agonizing at first. My lungs burned, my shins ached, and the icy wind felt like glass against my cheeks. But I kept running. I ran because I could. I ran because my blood filtered perfectly through 2 healthy organs, flushing out the lactic acid, keeping my chemistry balanced, keeping me alive. Every time my foot struck the pavement, I felt a deep, profound sense of ownership over my own flesh. Months bled into one another. Arthur's prediction had been spot on. Mr. Davis withdrew the $2 million lawsuit exactly 3 days after our disastrous deposition. Without the promise of a quick settlement, the contingency firm abandoned Barbara entirely. They had no legal standing, no money to pay hourly retainer fees, and no energy left to fight a losing battle. Silence settled over my life, thick and protective. I got a promotion at the design firm. I moved out of the corporate lease and rented a loft with high ceilings and exposed brick walls, filling it with thriving houseplants and mismatched comfortable furniture. I didn't check Liam's social media. I didn't ask mutual friends for updates. I excised him from my reality with the precision of a surgeon removing a tumor. News of his death didn't come with dramatic music or a weeping phone call. It arrived on a Tuesday morning in mid-February, tucked away in the back pages of the local online obituary section. I was sitting at my kitchen island, sipping black coffee and scrolling through the news on my tablet before heading to the office. My thumb dragged across the screen, and there it was, a small, square photo of him. It was an older picture, taken right around the time we first started dating. His hair was thick, his smile wide and easy, his eyes crinkling at the corners. He looked vibrant. He looked like the man I had once loved, before I realized that charm was just a survival mechanism for a parasite. Liam James, 31, passed away on Sunday evening at County General Hospital following a long battle with illness. He is survived by his mother, Barbara. There was no mention of a fiance, no mention of a grieving cousin, just a brief, sterile paragraph acknowledging that a body had ceased to function. I set the tablet down on the granite counter. My coffee had gone lukewarm. Grief is a strange, unpredictable animal. I waited for it to bite. I waited for the crushing weight of guilt to press down on my chest, for the what-ifs to flood my brain. What if I had just signed the paper? What if I had forgiven the affair? What if I had let them carve me open and take what they wanted? Nothing came. Instead, I walked over to the large bay window overlooking the street. People were rushing to work, bundled up in heavy wool coats, clutching travel mugs, exhaling white plumes of breath into the freezing air. The world was spinning. Life was happening relentlessly, indifferently. Liam died, because his body failed him. He died alone because his character failed him. He had spent his entire life extracting from others, extracting patience, extracting money, extracting love, and finally attempting to extract life itself. When the well ran dry, there was simply nothing left to sustain him. I pressed my palm flat against the cold glass of the window. My hand was warm, flushing with healthy, oxygenated blood. Later that afternoon, Arthur called me. He didn't offer condolences. He knew better. He just gave me the final necessary logistics. His estate is entirely insolvent. Arthur's voice crackled slightly over the car speakerphone as I drove home from the office. Medical debt wiped out whatever little Barbara had left. She lost the house to the bank last week. I received a notice from the probate court closing the final file on the fraud investigation. So, it's really over, I said, keeping my eyes on the taillights ahead of me. It's over, Chloe. The ledger is clean. I parked my car in the garage and took the elevator up to my floor. When I unlocked my door, the apartment was warm and quiet. My cat, a scruffy rescue I had adopted 2 months ago, trotted over to greet me, winding around my ankles and purring loudly. I picked him up, feeling the vibration in his small chest. I walked into the bathroom and flipped on the harsh overhead light. I set the cat down and lifted the hem of my shirt, turning slightly to look at my right side in the mirror. Smooth, unblemished skin. No scars, no jagged lines of angry tissue, no missing pieces. In my past life, I had been hollowed out. I had given away every piece of myself until there was nothing left but a ghost haunting a hospital room. But in this life, I was whole. I had looked the Reaper in the eye, pointed at the man holding the scalpel, and said, "Take him instead." I dropped my shirt, turned off the light, and walked back out into the living room to make dinner. I was hungry, and I had a long, full life left to live. Walking away from toxic people isn't a tragedy. It's a rescue mission, where you are both the victim and the hero. Chloe refused to be dismantled for someone else's survival, proving that true strength often lies in saying a final, unapologetic no. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell for more deeply human-gripping stories. Leave a comment below. Would you have walked away at the clinic or earlier? Stay strong and never apologize for protecting your peace.